Headlines. Thanks so much for joining us. The podcast that covers all the sports business stuff that you guys want to know about the most. He's Hadley Engelhart, agent to the stars. I'm your friend Matt, just kind of keeping the ship from sinking. That's our hope today. Busy show for you today. We're going to check in with Bobby Heck. He's the special assistant for the Tampa Bay Rays to their general manager. He's going to be in Dallas. We'll get his thought on GM meetings and the whole ins and outs of that job responsibility there and building a franchise. But Hadley, before we get into any of that, we have to talk about some of the biggest stories around sports, and they happen to be coming from Major League Baseball. Let's do the local, and then we'll do the national. So earlier in the week, Max Fried, he signed his new deal with the New York Yankees, and he got paid to the tune of 8 years and $218 million, which is the largest ever guarantee to a left-hand pitcher. The market is the market. I know a lot of teams wouldn't go 7 or 8 years for a 29 or 30-year-old pitcher. This deal will take him through age 39 at $27 million a year. Are you surprised at all at the length or the numbers?
Kind of both. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, he's a all-star pitcher when healthy. And the key is when healthy. At 30 years old, he's on the other side of the longevity. Does he play out this contract? Probably not. Definitely not in a starter role for sure. It's ironic that Cashman, after he lost out on Soto, basically said he wasn't going to spend crazy money. Now, is this crazy money? You know, I don't know what other teams are out there. I know that Max Fried, being from Los Angeles, you know, probably in his dream of dreams, wanted to play for the Dodgers. Not sure if they were a player in this, but obviously moving to New York, what a great opportunity for him, not just baseball-wise, but marketing and branding-wise and a bigger picture of things. So great for Max, great for Scott Boras, another big client of his. Surprised a little bit just because I'm not sure that there was enough demand out there for him at this level.
Right.
And I think the Yankees may have panicked a little bit after losing Soto.
So let's talk about that, and I'm glad you went there. If you're Boras and you realize the Yankees certainly wanted Soto, even if they didn't want to go to the numbers that the Mets went to, you know the reaction from the Yankee fan base is do something. And now you know they have the funds to go do other things. So if you're Boras, do you capitalize on the panic a little bit of, hey, you just lost Soto. The last thing you want to do is lose Max too, because I got the Red Sox here and I've got another team there. So maybe he pounced on their anxieties and getting maybe an extra year out of it.
Yeah, listen, Scott Boras had the top two free agents, right? He had Soto and he also has Max Fried, if they are the top two. So the Max Fried negotiations with the Yankees didn't happen yesterday. They were ongoing as well as the Soto. So it would be very interesting to see how he played them against each other. And if he knew all along that Soto was really leaning toward the Mets, did he use that as leverage to get the Yankees to up Fried's deal? And using all these different cards, you know, it's an interesting thing. I've had in my experience a free agent in the NFL where I had the top draft choice at that same position. And I knew that if they didn't sign my free agent client, they would potentially draft my client. So I was able to use that as leverage to get the best free agent deal, which we ended up doing. So I'm sure Scott Boras and his people, you know, were maneuvering this, massaging the numbers to make sure it was a win-win. Because you always have to remember, Matt, even though you're representing multiple players, when you're in negotiations, technically, you're supposed to have Chinese walls up. You're supposed to focus on that player only and do what's best for that player. So if Soto really wanted to go to the Mets and he could use it as leverage, great for Max Fried, and it was a win-win for everybody.
So let's talk about the Soto deal then. For those who have been, I don't know, in a coma for the last week, Soto signed a 15-year, $765 million deal with the Mets. There are so many layers to this that I find fascinating. What was the most interesting part of the deal, the years, the money, all of the above, some of the ins and outs we've heard of the deal?
I think the most interesting thing is no deferral. You know, so we talked about that on prior shows that, you know, is this the trend, what the Dodgers are doing? Because they're notorious for doing that. Soto's deal is not like that, so it's straight up money. It's unbelievable that they gave a player who is obviously 26, and so age played a big factor because he will see a good chunk of this. But I think people would say he's an average at best fielder defensively. Right. So you're paying for his bat. You look at Ohtani. You are paying for his bat, but also he's a two-way player.
And by the way, you get the brand of Ohtani.
Correct.
It's not a shot at Soto. Soto's a very good player. I don't know that you get. Well, I should say I know you don't get the extra benefits that you get with Ohtani because there's only one Ohtani.
Listen, at the end of the day, what's unique about baseball is there is no salary cap. So all you're doing is deferring money in theory, pushing it to future years. Steve Cohen could afford whatever. He doesn't mind the luxury tax. So it doesn't matter to these wealthy teams. And it's hard because we'll talk to Bobby Heck about this, and I don't know how much he can get into it. But when you play for a team like Tampa that doesn't have the money or has the money but doesn't spend the money like the Yankees or the Dodgers or Red Sox, it's hard to compete. So the rich get richer, and I think Cohen had to make a statement. And, it's going to be interesting how this plays out, with their first baseman. Mm-hmm. Are they going to bring Alonso back because they've spent all this money on Soto and other players? So it'll be very interesting how they balance this all out.
Which, by the way, is worth pointing out. There's no cap. You're right. But there still is some budget somewhere, even though Steve Cohen's got an unlimited supply of money. 2 years ago, after they spent, he came out after the season and said, I can't spend like this every year. Now, he can, but just like you run a household, you run a business.
But he is.
He is. But there's going to be a point where he says, we're not bringing this guy back. We're not doing this because we allocated the funds here. I mean, at some point, there is a glass ceiling or just some in your mind of like, I'm not spending more than this.
But is the question, right?
I think there is for everybody.
Because with new TV deals, it brings new revenue, and I think that
he's going to take losses, Hadley. And I don't mean like he can sell the franchise one day for whatever, but operating costs and everything else, there's no way you're not going to be over your head on what you're bringing in and what you're spending at some level.
I think this is also where these owners have their ego. They want to win. And he's got enough pieces right now that he thinks they're only a piece or two or three away that we're going to spend, and we're going to spend a lot. Listen, if the NFL did not have a cap like it is now, you don't think a Jerry Jones or Shad Khan in Jacksonville would spend an enormous amount of money, much more than they're spending now, because they want to win. They definitely would.
But what a buffer in the NFL to say, we'd love to spend more, but we can't because the league governs us. So let me ask you about one part of this deal that I find pretty interesting. There was a couple of reports, one that said Soto wanted a luxury suite. And the Yankees have never done that. They didn't do it for the captain, Derek Jeter. They didn't do it for Aaron Judge. Now, I was reading some of the financials on this. Yankee Stadium suites cost about $20,000 per game. It's about $24 million with no price adjustments as far as revenue that you would be able to not gain by signing Juan Soto, or should I say giving this to him if you would have signed him. Plus, you have to go back to your guys and go, well, we made an exception for him, whereas Steve Cohen just gave him the luxury suite. Isn't there a way you as the agent could say, listen, Juan, the Yankees are going up on their deal another $5 million, another $10 million. Let's pay for the suite out of what they gave us. That's the compromise to get the deal done. Do you really think that was the difference in a 15-year commitment?
I don't. Listen, we have done it before with teams, specifically on the football side, where the player wanted a suite. And again, they don't want to create a precedent, because once you create one, it opens up the floodgates. So what did you do? Here's the cost of the suite. Let's add it on to the contract, and everybody's happy, and the player's happy with it. So I don't believe when you're talking about $700 million and he walks away because of, these little minor details. I mean, at the end of the day, if he wants a suite, he can buy the team.
Well, that's right.
So let's be real about it. So these rumors get out there. Was there conversations and they said they wouldn't do it? But if you really wanted to be there, there's a way to massage that deal so everybody is happy.
Is there, and putting you on the spot, is there something you've been asked for a client that you kind of thought, all right, the client wants me to do it, but I know there's no way they will. Maybe I'm doing it to get something else. Or is there anything kind of sort of off to your top of your head that's not standard in those things?
Yes, there is. I can't even go into details.
What a tease!
On to what, but and then sometimes you have to tell your client, listen, we've gotten everything that we've wanted. Now you want these additional things. I'll share a quick story that's not related to what they wanted, but many years ago we did a deal with with the Miami Dolphins, and we had gone back and gotten some extra perks, and they weren't happy about that, but we got it. Well, it turned out I was coaching youth football at the time, and we became the Miami Dolphins. At the same time I'm doing this deal, so I called up the general manager. I said, I have one more request. He goes, what now? And he was not happy with me. And I said, I need decals, because it was the brand new year of the new logo.
Right.
And I wanted my kid and all the players to have the brand new Dolphin logo. He goes, I cannot believe you're asking me for this. But you know what? The next day, I had 30 sets of decals sent to my office. And our team was the only team in the country outside the Miami Dolphins that year to have the new logo with the Dolphins.
I love it. I should let you know, and this is kind of funny. So the Juan Soto $765 million. It's more, for instance, than the Pirates' payroll since 2015, which is $757 million. It's more than the average MLS franchise. It's more than LeBron James' all-time NBA earnings. It's more than Patrick Mahomes' deal that runs through 2031. It's more than Tom Brady's all-time earnings. It's more than the 2024 NFL salary cap. And it's more than Tiger Woods' career PGA Tour earnings.
Yeah, I think I read also it's more than LeBron and Michael Jordan collectively all-time earnings. So
being born at the right time?
Correct.
Yeah.
Listen, at the end of the day, LeBron's be able to do stuff with his son now because of leverage. So everybody, has that power. And listen.
You're comparing it to cap sports, too, which also changes.
And Cohen didn't have to spend the money with the Mets if he didn't want it, right? The market dictates it. He's spending it. Good for Juan Soto. Good for his team.
Good for his agent.
And good for his agent. And good for all parties. Listen, you take those two numbers that's $1 billion between Soto and Fried in the last 72 hours. Not a bad day for Scott Boras and his people.
All right, coming up, we'll talk to Bobby Heck. He's the special assistant to the GM for the Tampa Bay Rays. He's in Dallas for GM meetings. We'll pick his brain about what that daily life is like, the business sides of it, and more next. All right, we continue with our episode of Deals and Deadlines. That's Hadley on Matt. We're joined now by a very busy man. He is the special assistant to the baseball president of the Tampa Bay Rays. He's Bobby Heck, and he joins us here on Deals and Deadlines. Bobby, we appreciate the time there in Dallas for GM meetings. And again, we appreciate the time. We know you're busy. What is the day-to-day life for what you guys do, GMs, front office folks in Dallas? Meetings all day? Is it pleasantries? Is it coffee? Are you getting deals done? What's the whole day look like?
It's kind of all of that. I mean, it's the winter meetings have actually changed in a number of ways. I think when it originally started was really to create a lot of interest in baseball prior to Christmas, to sell season tickets. And it was really, and then once they started getting 30 clubs and going back to that time, maybe 24 clubs in the room or in the same place, we really sparked up trades and made headlines. But days have changed, and now I think we set the framework for a lot of trades, talking with a lot of clubs and in our suites and, putting ideas together. And then, waiting on other clubs to react. But we're just really waiting on a lot of clubs to go through their free agent money before trade season starts now.
So, Bobby, obviously you've been doing this for a number of years and, obviously had uber success with the Astros and now with the Rays. When you go to these winter meetings, I'm assuming that, you don't go there and just say, I hope we generate some interest or dialogue. This is something that has been ongoing. It gives you a chance to do face-to-face. And, the second part of the question is, how do the Rays, if you don't want to get into particulars, when you know that, there's certain players you may be interested in, but you have these big money markets that may be interested in them as well, how do you guys handle that as you go into these winter meetings?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of that is like we have targets set out before the season starts, and we don't have a lot of options. We usually have a couple of targets. So we were actually contacting the agent, as one set opens up 5 days after the World Series, and expressing our interest. And it actually becomes a recruitment on our end. We've had success with Zach Eflin, Charlie Morton, and now this year with Danny Jansen, where we had a specific need and really did a job of getting after that person, creating a relationship, even doing visits to them. And really exposing, like with the two pitchers, we really got Kyle Snyder involved, and he got on Zooms with them, and really just make it more personal. And I think, there's some players that we are actually starting the offseason that we know that we will or will not be able to compete on. But there's also someone feels like they're a target of your club. I think that gets appreciated. And I think it speaks to probably the makeup information that we have on that player already that does appreciate it and kind of finds out who we are and what our culture is. And we've had a pretty good reputation around the game of what our clubhouse is and how our manager leads. So we've got a kind of a step. We've resurged a lot of careers as well. So that reputation does help us go in the door.
And this is nothing new that, you play in a division where you have some big spenders, right? Yankees, they just signed Max Fried. Red Sox spend their share of money. I'm sure some other teams, Baltimore and others, are going to be there. Does that present to you a challenge you like, knowing you're not going to be swimming in the same waters all the time when it comes to free agents and maybe deals you have to get done, but you guys have proven time and time again you've overcome that. How much do you love that challenge from your perspective?
Oh, the challenge is embraced. I've been here for 12 years. I've never heard somebody wish we had more money. It's really like, how are we going to take down Baltimore now? And, it's just, or when each team's in their window, whether it's Baltimore, we were fearing Toronto a few years back, we were fearing. And then, of course, the Yankees in Boston. But, it's really like, how are we going to do this? And, luckily with our owner, he challenges to take risks, not, risks that are irresponsible. But he knows we have to be on the edge with things and do things different at times as well. But, no, it's definitely embraced. And you just let them do their business. And, we're really more into good players, not so much famous.
Yeah, listen, it's old school, Matt. You know what they do there? They scout.
What a crazy approach.
What a crazy concept that they, just don't spend money because the public thinks they should. And so, Bobby, obviously the national media has been following everything that's going on in Tampa with the hurricane and the damage to your facility and then the issues going on with the city back and forth. Has that played any role as you guys are at the winter meetings dealing with free agents? Or like in other sports, it's about the culture of the team, it's about the management, the ownership, and the opportunities more than it is, the bells and whistles of the facility and all those kind of things?
Yeah, I think the bells and whistles are actually going to be really good at Steinbrenner for this year. So, they've updated their clubhouse. Our league clubhouse manager's been in there. He said it's probably one of the top 5 in the big leagues, actually. They've updated their batting cages and a lot of the other facilities there as well. The challenge is going to be playing basically in Florida State League weather, which is going to be hot, humid. We're going to have rainouts, rain delays. But there's already been curtailing of our schedule to try to stay away from as many July, August dates. So we start out playing 35 of 40 at home. But it comes back to us. We're going to be on the road for some stretch like that as well, come July and August. So with that, some of the free agents are going to have a lot more choices. We've gotten some, we'll get back to you. And there's others where, let us hear more. What are you doing? So it's really just being forward facing as much as we can. And, you alluded to earlier, like what goes on at their meetings. We have more meetings with agents than we do teams. In the past, you start talking about a trade and, try to get in the same room together. But so much is done now just through texting and emails. There's not a lot of face to face with a lot of clubs. At times we'll break away for that, but it's really been a time and then other times the players are here with the agent. So, it's really trying to get FaceTime with them and giving them more detail of our situation. And, they have a decision to make, but, it's going to be challenging. It's going to be a player that has to want to take on that challenge, but, we're hoping about how we approach our culture here is an attraction to them as well.
So talk to me about dealing with the Hadley Engleharts of the world, the agents. I mean, I'm sure there are some that you have better relationships with than others. I'm sure you have a better back and forth, a better working relationship. So give me some idea of, you don't have to name names unless you want to, just working with some guys who make it easier as opposed to some that you have to work a little harder.
Yeah, I think really now, because of the size of front offices, we're equipped with a baseball president, and then we have 5 AGM VPs. So actually the responsibilities and delegations of talking with different agents is actually spread out. So we try to play the favor, like who has relationships here and there. I'll actually take on a couple of those on my own. So it's really just to make, let's try to put who might have problems or have had past problems with an agent, is really just try to get aligned the best we can with each agency. And most of the agencies are big enough to have multiple people as well. As things grow, as you get closer to a deal, obviously our baseball president, Eric Neander, and probably the head of that agency is going to jump in as well. But as far as the leg work, I think it's really just matching up relationships.
Yeah, and I think that would be for any sport, Matt and Bobby. It's when you have these relationships with the hierarchy. You're about those initial meetings, and in those meetings, you kind of shoot the breeze and you kind of catch up, and then you kind of talk turkey, and if there's real substance to it, at that point you start kind of getting parameters, and then the Bobby or whoever else would be that point person would then say, all right, we're moving in the right direction. Is it sincere? Are we trying to get a deal done? If we are, all right, let's put the people in place to make this deal happen. Bobby, you were talking about today with the Rule 5 draft. Is that something that has gone away with baseball? It appears that less and less people are taking people via the Rule 5. Do you think that's the future, or just kind of, the last few years post-COVID, it's been that way? And is this something that, Tampa focuses in on a player or two?
Yeah, we have actually had them taken many players in the Rule 5. I expect us to definitely take one today, possibly two, because we have some open roster spots. I actually thought when we went to 26-man working rosters that we might see an uptick in that. But I think, too, is we just because of versatility of rosters, matchups nowadays, that 26 spot has become more and more vital to clubs. And then also the fact that you have pitchers not going as deep as they used to. So that spot is much like the 25th spot was used for years. And I thought more teams would actually use that to, take on a player. One, you really got to try out during spring training because you have the option to sell the player back, or trade for him so you don't have to have the major league penalty of having him on your roster all year. So I think it sounds like it's going to be a little more active this year. But it's hard a lot of times. I think a lot of too is like clubs are definitely at the point where they're scouting their own systems better and protecting their players much better. So it's made it harder to find players, and I think obviously the clubs that have deeper systems that have trouble getting, to that 40-man spot and, have to have some guys exposed. We expect to lose a couple players today as well.
Bobby, without having you, say something negative about another club, again, unless you want to, what was your reaction and what was sort of like your brethren reaction to the Juan Soto deal, both numbers and years?
Actually not surprised. So we knew it was going to be a big number. I think more thought about it would have a 6 in front of it. But you're
only $100 million off there, Bobby. just 100.
Can we say 15% instead?
Yeah, that's better.
Not bad. But all it takes is two clubs to start competing, and with clubs especially that have a lot of resources. So that kind of created its own market as well. So I mean, for a while we were hearing it was going to land in the 6s, and then competitive fires took over, and it was adding years as well.
So Bobby, let me ask you. So when the numbers are 6 and north, right? When a team, and this doesn't have to be Tampa, it could be any team, when you're not in that framework, and let's say you're in the 500 number. Do you even make the call to see if there's an interest just because of the makeup of the team, or you don't even waste that phone call because you already know what the answer is going to be?
No, we're pretty diligent about it, and it's like, turn over every rock and don't assume anything. So, if we see that a player has a fit with us, we, put a value on that player, we definitely mark our interest. And a lot of times we get laughed at, but that's fine. And but there's also times where we've had players come back to us and we thought of that as a destination, and have gotten traction with players in the past because of it.
Bobby, we know you're busy. Can't thank you enough for the time. Have a good rest of the adventure there in Dallas, and we'd love to catch up with you down the road.
Thanks. Enjoyed it, guys.
Thanks, Bob.
Appreciate it very much. There's Bobby Heck. He's the special assistant to the president for the Tampa Bay Rays, joining us here on Deals and Deadlines. All right, coming up, we'll talk about the college football business, and it's booming. Plus the business of Bill Belichick, and believe it or not, Taylor Swift. We'll explain those details next. All right, we continue with this episode of Deals and Deadlines. Hadley and Matt back with you. I'll remind you again, if you're new to the podcast, thank you for finding us. We're available on all podcast platforms, available on 680 The Fans YouTube. Subscribe on any of those podcast platforms and look for the show each Friday when it drops. All right, Hadley, let's talk about the business of college football, which is booming to say the least, as we have the new college football playoff, which starts on December 20th. As we lead up to that, let me give you a couple of ratings numbers, and you tell me if the playoff is hurting the regular season and it's hurting the conference championship games, because those are the things I heard that would happen. 19.7 million people tuned in to watch Georgia and Texas play an overtime game in the SEC championship game. Meanwhile, ABC scored the most ever watched conference championship slate they've had in over a decade, averaging nearly 9 million viewers per game. In addition, their Field Pass had the highest viewership ever. The Big 12 championship game, the ACC, both had big numbers in their championship games. I think this is kind of a build-up to what people have in the curiosity and the excitement of the playoff, which tells me the playoff's only going to get bigger. The conference championship games aren't going anywhere for simple reasons. The money's too big.
Yeah, listen, it could not have been a better scenario for college football, for what's about to happen, even moving forward, right? We're experimenting with this 12-team format. It's the first time we've ever had this. What was going to happen with these conference games and now moving forward. And I just think there's too much excitement. Let's take the SEC championship. Win or lose, both teams were advancing, right? So therefore, it didn't mean as much other than one would be a top 4 seed, one would not be. It didn't matter. It turned out to be a great game, but all these games are great. And now for the first time, we have ESPN going to Notre Dame to televise a game.
Instead of NBC, which
has had the rights forever. So it is only going to create more and more excitement. It's only going to create more and more money. That's the good side. Now here's what the downside is, which we'll get into, is we've talked about this before, is the NIL and the transfer portal. Because now it's created so much more excitement, so much awareness, so much more money that players are now wanting and, in fact, demanding more money. So it's not all roses because your team this year is not going to be your team next year.
It's funny you say that, and I want to touch on that. I will add, we're going to 14 teams at some point. We're going to 16 teams at some point. It's 2 years, it's 4 years. There's just going to be too much money. And to your point, it's worth mentioning, South Carolina had an edge rusher by the name of Dylan Stewart who has agreed to a new deal to stay at South Carolina for the 2025 season. He's expected to receive between $1 million and $1.5 million per sources close to the situation. So we've already got to the point where I can jump in the portal or I can decommit if I'm a freshman if we don't talk about a new figure that we already didn't agree on. Like, this is pro sports 2.0 more so than it was even a year ago.
Well, it's even worse than pro sports. I don't want to say the word worse, but in pro sports, when you sign a contract, you have to live out the length of that contract.
Yeah, this is more challenging.
This is now with the portal, it's full free agency. And so it's got its good sides if you're on the winning side of it, but it's got its downsides. I mean, you take, for example, I just obviously read about the Tulane quarterback. They gave him an opportunity. You play a guy as a freshman, he does well, and they're offering him more money to stay there. And if he likes everything, he said, nope, I'm leaving. Within a day or two, he enters the portal, takes a visit to Duke, he signs a deal. It's a 7-figure deal. There are other reports of a player at Florida who demanded more money as a linebacker, demanded to be a starter, demanded to be play on third downs.
Oh, my goodness.
And, they said no, and he's now entered the portal. So, unfortunately, the demand is getting, I think, a little bit ridiculous, what these players are asking for. Money's one thing. And, again, we can go back to Soto and Freed. If someone's willing to pay it, God bless them.
The market's the market.
But there's no more, as coaches would tell us, it's about the name on the front. It's not the name on the back. That's not the case. No, it's only about the name on the back.
Yeah, this bill came due for years and years of kids wanting to have compensation, having to get it under the table. Now it's all out there, and there are no governors on it. To your point on the portal, around 1,000 FBS players entered the transfer portal on Monday of this past week, nearly doubling the total from day one a year ago. And most notably, quarterbacks are capitalizing because they're the sought-after pieces. Putting their name in the portal allows, at that point, you tell me what collective, you tell me what potential NIL dollars are there, and now you're going to start negotiating against 3 or 4 different schools and what they can present. It was not supposed to be pay for play, but Hadley, we got there a long time ago.
No, and it is 100% pay for play. I mean, you take University of Miami. They brought in a player. He did well. He's a Heisman finalist. He got paid. He's going to be a high draft choice. You know what Miami's going to do? No panic. We're going to get the next guy. So again, they're just replacing one piece of the puzzle with another piece of the puzzle. Unfortunately, for the coaches that are at the mid-majors or lower majors, that are willing to take a risk on a player, are developing this player, they do well, and they leave them, it's hard for those programs, and so it's a tough thing. And all we're talking about now is just football. It's happening in basketball. It's even happening in baseball.
Sure.
The non-revenue sports where they are poaching players. And it's very difficult for these programs that don't have the wherewithal, that don't have the $20 million NIL collective to compete against a team that has only a few $1 million collective. So unfortunately, I think what student athletes have to start weighing is, what are you trying to get out of this? Is it just the money, or is it the experience? Mm-hmm. And if you have the wrong type of advisor that's all about the money because they get a percentage of it, you're going to go down the wrong way, and you'll find players that'll play 4 years and they'll be from school A, B, C, and finish up at school
Get
B.
as much as they can. So let's talk about a story. As we record this on Wednesday, it drops each and every Friday. We have all the Bill Belichick rumors to North Carolina, including word that Bill presented North Carolina officials with what was called a 400-page Bible with his wants, needs, demands, from salary to staff to organization, top to bottom. So I want to start with that. 400 pages? Like, I'm sorry, I could write down what I want in a 10-point, PowerPoint and have it done in a page. What in the world could he be asking for in a 400-page, as they called it, a Bible?
Yeah, I know Bill, and I don't see that happening. He's very short and to the point. I think that it would be very unique to see him at a UNC or somewhere else. Obviously, he's a great coach. The question that everyone has, including myself, is, does he fit in today's mindset that we just talked about, right, with current free agency and people leaving and no loyalty? And I think that's why Nick Saban left the game when he did, because he wanted to be a coach. He wanted to recruit, but didn't want to be recruiting 24/7. So I don't know if it's a great fit for Bill, but there's other rumors that his son would be in writing the heir apparent. And I guess there's certain buyout language that they decide not to go that. There's a penalty to do it. But, if that's part of the plan and that's really what his motive is to help his son become the head coach there or elsewhere. We talked about LeBron earlier, and we keep on talking about it. If you have the ability and power to do things that benefit yourself, benefit your family, more power to you. But it'll be very interesting to see how this collegiate UNC or any other college thing plays out with Bill, because he's a great coach, and it'll be interesting to see with the recruiting how he fits into that.
So let me ask you two questions. One, if you were spitballing, and I know the top of the college football salary structure is Kirby Smart, and there's Ryan Day, and there's a few others who are well over $10 million. I mean, is that where we're starting with Bill, for him to say, if I'm going to go to college, I'm going to do this? We're talking 10, 11, 12 million a year. So that's part one. And what do you think Bill's worth to North Carolina? Like, what does he mean to season tickets, to primetime games, to additional revenue? Like, he's got to come with that value, right?
Yeah, but I don't think it changes anything. At the end of the day, listen, they sell out their games anyway. The television deals are already done. So whether they're on the 3:30 game or the 12 o'clock game or the 8 o'clock game, it doesn't change the bottom line numbers to UNC. I think it brings excitement. But at the end of the day, what really brings excitement is wins. And the question is, can he, with his history, bring players there and bring in a young Tom Brady and develop that Tom Brady? And again, that player has to want to stay there, right? That means the collective has to want to pay. And we run into that same problem. And so it'll be interesting to see if that happens.
Does Bill help with that, though? I would think more collectives and more advertisers and more endorsers are probably excited to be around that, no?
Yeah, I think they'll be able to increase their collective numbers. But at the same time, it comes down to the player, right? How much is the player going to demand and want? And if he enters the portal and goes somewhere else, then he goes to that other school. So it'll be very interesting to see. We've talked about John Gruden in the past, another great NFL mind that if he went to the college ranks, the excitement would be there. He's an amazing coach. No one could take that away. It's dealing with this new facet of college sports, is the constant recruiting. And again, you get the player, you coach him, you win, and now he demands more money. And the collective is only so much, like we talked about with the Mets or anything else in baseball. At some point you say, hey, we're giving you X. We can't give you X times 10. Well, then I'm entering the portal and someone else is going to pay it to me. So now you got to start from square one again. So there's always that demand, and it'll be very interesting to see how Bill, John Gruden, or any of these other well-known NFL coaches, if they step into the college ranks, how they handle all that.
Before I jump into the podcast portal, which I might for more money, let's finish up because I only do this because Hadley's a big Swiftie. Taylor Swift numbers came out on her Eras tour, which did $2 billion with a B, $2 billion in revenue. And we know it was a stadium tour, so we're talking SoFi in LA and Gillette and Foxborough and Hard Rock and MetLife and worldwide. 3 to 6 concerts were hosted by each venue, somewhere pulling in 10 to 20 million just in overall revenue. You've been around sports and been around entertainment. There have only been a few that can just present this kind of money-making opportunity. Whether Elvis, in the country music world, maybe it was Garth Brooks, right? Maybe in the boy band world, there was an NSYNC or a Backstreet Boys. This is unlike anything we've ever seen, her ability to be this business that just keeps thriving.
Yeah, it is. It is, amazing, the brand she has developed and the following and the loyalty. And friends of mine were going there. And I had a friend of mine miss my high school reunion because he and his family wanted to see Taylor Swift in concert. So it is truly amazing. And it's also, whether it's done intentionally or not, this relationship she's had with Travis Kelce has, created this excitement for her in the sports world. I travel and I see all these Chiefs fans everywhere, and it's because they're Taylor Swift fans. So, listen, more power to her. The fact that she's done this brand and she's talented, but it is crazy to see the numbers. And, would the Beatles have done this in their heyday if they had this type of thing? Would Elvis had, you wonder. Mm-hmm. But she is in a class by herself.
And not slowing down.
No, not at all. And she will continue. And, it'll only get bigger if she breaks up with Travis Kelce, because then it becomes even bigger with her new album. And, wish them well.
Poor
but,
Travis.
It's correct. Poor Travis, because if it goes south, everyone's going to know about it, and it's going to be big.
She'll have a double LP at that point. All right, I will remind you guys, please remember to subscribe to the podcast. We do drop on each and every podcast platform on Friday mornings, also available on the 680 The Fan YouTube channel, so a lot of ways to consume this product. We'll do it each and every week. For Hadley, I'm Matt. We thank you guys for joining us for the latest edition of Deals and Deadlines.